Yeah, the big thing that did happen in 2021 again is COVID-19, and COVID-19 did result in a lower number of participants, and it might have affected which students were able to participate. I think a lot of very high-risk groups are less likely to come to school. Anyway, I think during COVID, that's probably exaggerated. So we may have had fewer kids that are members of high-risk groups. It also, COVID-19 probably affected behaviors and characteristics of the participants. COVID did affect how students socialize, and a lot of the risk behaviors that we look at are generally things that happen when kids are socializing with each other, so they had less opportunity to do that. And we do see a lot of things that did go down in prevalence. So drug use, alcohol use did go down a little bit more than we would normally have expected in 2021. So what the results are, we did see an increase in measures associated with mental health and suicidal behaviors. We had a decrease in all measures of alcohol consumption. This is something that's been going on for over a decade now. We've seen good movement on alcohol measures. And similarly, in most current drug use measures, we've seen a decrease. And we're not going to talk about this today, but we've seen very steep decreases in tobacco use of all kinds lately. So here is a picture of New Mexico by public health region. And today, of course, we're going to be talking about Otero County, which is the state is divided into public health regions by the Department of Health. Otero County is in the Southwest public health region, and these three school districts did participate, and then plus the Mescalero Apache population from the school down there did. I know that those students, some of them probably live in Lincoln and some in Otero. We don't know the address of students. We only know where the school is and where the majority of students go to. So we did end up putting all of those students into the Otero County data. We'll also be talking about Lincoln County. Ruidoso, Carrizoso, and Capitan participated in the survey. Corona and Hondo Valley did not participate in the survey. Okay, so just to jump into it, here's this is something that we do at the beginning of each presentation. Usually we play a little matching game, and so these are three new questions. On the left are the indicators: frequent mental distress, low food security, and teased or called names because of race or ethnicity. So what we usually do is we ask people to match up those indicators on the left with the rates on the right. So, and I did not send the information for a poll to anybody in Otero County this time. So sorry, we'll just pretend like we're doing the poll, I guess. But so the idea is really just to kind of challenge your preconceptions of what these things are like. And so I know a lot of you saw this presentation a couple of weeks ago for the Otero County Health Council. These are the same, but and we're looking at the Otero County rates here. So the question is, what do you think? Whoops, that wasn't supposed to come up quite yet. The rate of frequent mental distress in Otero County is 24.2%. So yeah, in Lincoln County, that's 27.9%. So it's a little bit higher in Lincoln County. And in New Mexico, 32.7%. So this is quite a bit lower in both of those counties than in New Mexico on the whole. So what is frequent mental distress? It is the question that we ask is, during the past 30 days, how often was your mental health not good? So that's poor mental health includes stress, anxiety, and depression. And this is what Otero County looks like. So those two yellow wedges for always and most of the time, students who said they always or most of the time experienced poor mental health, or frequent mental distress, as we call frequent mental distress. So 24.2%, almost a quarter of the students said that. And in Lincoln County, it is 27.9% of the students. So a little bit lower than in Otero County. The next question in the matching game is low food security. And so if you just think of which of these numbers is the percentage for low food security, it is in Otero County, it's 13.1% of the students who had low food security. In in Lincoln County, 11%. So pretty close to the same thing. And in New Mexico, 12.8%. So pretty similar, Lincoln, Otero, and New Mexico. The question for low food security is, during the past 30 days, how often did you not go hungry because did you go hungry because there was not enough food in your home? So kids who said sometimes, most of the time, or always were considered to have low food security. And that was, again, 13.1% in Otero County. And Lincoln County, always, most of the time, or sometimes, is 11% who said that. And then the third question for the matching game is being teased or called names because of race or ethnicity. And that answer is 15.9% of the students said they were teased or called names. This is something very similar, exactly the same in Lincoln County, New Mexico, very similar to Otero and Lincoln County. So we don't see a lot of differences between Otero and Lincoln yet. This is what being teased or called names because of race, ethnicity looks at by race or ethnicity. And you see that for Asians or Pacific Islanders or Black or African Americans, they have a much higher rate of being teased for race, ethnicity than other students. This is in the Southwest Public Health region. It's very similar to what's in New Mexico. So New Mexico as a whole looks very much like Otero County for this. It does change as we go around the state and we get to areas where there are more or fewer students of particular race, ethnicity. So right next door in the southeast part of the state, this is the statewide rate again, and here's the Southeast Public Health region. So you can see Black or African Americans and Asian or Pacific Islanders still have a very high rate, but it is very different for American Indian or Alaska Native students, of like 3 times the rate of being teased because of race or ethnicity in the southeast part of the state, but not in every county. In Lincoln County, that rate is 14%. So it's much lower in Lincoln County than the rest of that public health region. And it's about the same as in Otero County. So to jump into the mental health questions, this frequent mental distress is a new question this year. And what this is saying, we're looking at the percentage of students who reported non-suicidal self-injury. The blue bar marks those who say they did not experience frequent mental distress. And the yellow bar on top is the kids who did experience frequent mental distress. So these kids who did experience frequent mental distress, 44%, 44.5% of them were engaging in non-suicidal self-injury, compared to only 10.3% of those who did not have frequent mental distress. And you can see this pattern is similar for the other mental health and suicidal indicators that we have. So SAD or hopelessness, kids with frequent mental distress were much more likely to report that than those without frequent mental distress. Same with seriously considered suicide, made a suicide plan, and attempted suicide. This again is in Otero County. And if we look at Lincoln County, we see some very similar patterns there. So this is a question that I think really helps to round out our mental health section in the YRRS. I think it's going to be something that's really very helpful. It is associated with a lot of the things that we would expect poor mental health to be associated with in the survey. Here we're looking at trends. This is the New Mexico trend for sadness or hopelessness. You see that the New Mexico rate increased by 52% in 10 years. In Lincoln County, you can see it increased. It looked very similar to the state up until 2019, and it goes down in 2021. And so it's a little bit off of the state for especially up to 2021. But when you look at Otero County, you can see this is a really a steep increase until 2021, and it drops a huge decrease from 2019 to 2021. Both of these counties are very atypical. I was just on a call with the national YRRS folks and a bunch of other states, and every single state and the nation reported that this sadness and hopelessness measure has just continued to get worse and worse for us all over the country. So I don't know if this is maybe some kind of artifact of COVID. I don't really see how anyway, or it could be just a very good job y'all are doing in those counties with kids and mental health problems. So we hope that this is something that continues. And if you guys have anything to say about this, if you want to talk about what you're doing in the schools for any of this stuff, I really would look forward to hearing some of that. Here's Otero County. This is the same chart we just looked at for sadness and hopelessness. You can see that for non-suicidal self-injury, that's kind of been decreasing for a while. Seriously considered attempting suicide is down from what it was in 2011. Made a suicide plan really hasn't changed much. Attempted suicide is down, and as is suicide attempts resulting in an injury has decreased over the last 10 years. Looking at Lincoln County, again, we already looked at this trend. This is felt sad or hopeless. See, for non-suicidal self-injury, that's actually been increasing a little bit, as has been making a suicide or considering attempting suicide and making a suicide plan. Attempted suicide is really about where it was 10 years ago, and a serious suicide attempt, one that resulted in an injury that had to be treated by a doctor or nurse, has come down a little bit, not much, but that is an encouraging trend. I would just say, I want to add that this really, the mental health concerns that we see are really much more prevalent among girls than boys. It really is a problem, and nationally recognized as well. This is a problem that's really mainly affecting our girls compared to boys. You can see that the girls' rate for each one of these is, it's about twice as much as for boys. So this is the Lincoln County data. Girls have a higher rate for every single one of these mental health or suicidal measures than boys. And for Otero County, we see something similar, except for sadness and hopelessness, boys and girls have the same rate. But for suicidal behaviors, it's just the same story. Girls have about twice the rate for everything that we look at. So this chart is looking at protective factors in the community, and we are looking at the percent of students who attempted suicide. So the green bars are representing the percent of students who attempted suicide. Those students who said not true at all to the protective factor "an adult cares about me," among those who said that is not true at all, that they have an adult who cares about me, 16.8% attempted suicide in the past year, compared to only 14% among those who said a little bit or pretty much true. And among those who said it's very much true that they have an adult who cares about me, only 7.2% committed suicide. So these are the same pattern that we see for the other protective factors. We see an adult tells me when I do a good job and I'm interested or involved in group activities. These are really strong associations that we see here with these good relationships. Moving on to alcohol use, um, we have seen downward trends in alcohol use in the state and the nation for about 15 years. And this is the boys rate for boys has come down a lot faster than for girls, but for boys and girls, the rate has come down a lot. In Otero County, it's come down, you can see, for current drinking. So that's drinking within the past 30 days. It's come all the way down from 42.7 to 10.2% of the kids were current drinkers. Again, this is a COVID year. Kids had less opportunity to engage in a lot of these behaviors. So that could be the reason for some of this drop. But even if we just look at 2019, this is a really steep decline from 2011 to 2019. And we'll see what happens in 2023. I hope it keeps going down, of course. First drink before the age of 13, we see that has decreased in Otero County, as has binge drinking. This little asterisk is just because we changed the definition of binge drinking between 2015 and 2017. But you can see the trend is still a downward trend. So a very positive trend there. And drinking and driving has come down from 12.2% all the way to 2.6% in 2021. So these are all really great trends. In Otero County, in Lincoln County, we see something similar, not quite as strong downward trend, but going from 33.5 to 25.6 for current drinking. As first drink before the age of 13 has come down too. Binge drinking has come down by about half, and this disappeared from the legend. That's drinking and driving right there. So that's also come down over the whole 10 years. So this is, again, this is statewide data. Here we're looking at protective factors in the home. And here we're looking at drinking alcohol before the age of 13. So you see something that looks very similar pattern-wise. So of those students who said it's not true at all that they have a parent or some other adult at home who's interested in their schoolwork, of those, 23.3% drank alcohol before the age of 13. Of those who said that it was very true that they had a parent who's interested in their schoolwork at home, 18.7%. And among those who said it's very much true that they have a parent who's interested in their schoolwork, only 14% of them drank alcohol before the age of 13. So this relationship, this involvement, if you will, of parents in their kids' lives is a very strong factor in whether or not they are engaging in any of these alcohol-related behaviors. And then moving on to drug use, this is pretty incredible. This has happened all over the state, although in Otero County, this is a very huge drop compared to the rest of the state. But we've had for years, the current marijuana use trend has been bouncing around a little north of 25% of the kids, and it just took a nosedive this year. Again, COVID could be a reason. We are very interested in this for the next few years, especially because of the recent legalization of marijuana in the state. So we'll have to be watching this very carefully. Use marijuana before the age of 13 may be a better indicator of long-term trend this year, especially, but it has gone down quite a lot, from 21.6 to 11.7% in Otero County. In Lincoln County, we do see this drop for current marijuana use to 2021. So we see something similar, and it ends up a little bit lower than where it started in 2011. Whereas use marijuana before the age of 13 has come down a lot. Looking at other drugs, we're back to Otero County here. Sorry to bounce. This isn't too confusing, bouncing back and forth, but Otero County prescription pain medication misuse. So using prescription pain medications without a doctor's prescription has come down, as has synthetic marijuana use. It's kind of been up and down a lot, but if you look at the first year we asked the question and the last year that we asked the question, it's down quite a bit. Inhalant use has been coming down, and again, the lowest in 2021, but you can see it was really on a downward trajectory before COVID ever hit. And we see some very similar patterns in Lincoln County. Slight decrease for synthetic marijuana use, little decrease for inhalant use overall. And then looking at cocaine has really come down. Heroin use has come down, or methamphetamine use has come down a lot, as has heroin use. Again, the lowest rates are in 2021, but you can see that these have been coming down for years before the year of COVID. So this is really good news. This is Otero County. Looking at Lincoln County, we see something pretty similar. We kind of see this spike, this unusual spike here in 2019, but it's down. It is way down for 2021. That 2019 spike occurs for pretty much every drug that we've looked at in Lincoln County. So it's kind of a curious thing that's happening. Okay, and here's the same chart, similar looking chart, looking at, this time we're looking at protective factors in the school. We look at whether or not a teacher or other adult listens to me when I have something to say, teacher or other adult believes I'll be a success. There are clear rules for my behaviors in school, and I'm involved in group activities in school. So again, here, what we're looking at is prescription pain medication misuse. And you can see that these students who did not have this strong relationship with teachers in their school had a much higher rate of prescription pain medication misuse than did those students who said it was very much true that they had this relationship. And it's true for each of the resiliency or protective factors that we look at. It's true for almost all of the drugs indicators that we look at. It's true pretty much across the board. I would just say, I guess, the school factors are really strongly associated with almost all the risk behaviors, as are the family related risk protective factors. Those are the two strongest sets of factors that we have. And then I want to just talk a little bit about students at high risk. We have 5 different groups of students who we consider to be at really high risk for a lot of things in the survey. We have sexual minority students, gender minority students, students who have a short-term residence in the United States. So students who've lived in the United States for 6 years or less. Students with physical disabilities or long-term health problems, and students who are homeless or unhoused. Here we're looking at sexual orientation. The blue bar are straight students. The dark blue bar are straight students. The light blue bar are lesbian, gay, or bisexual students. And you can see here that lesbian, gay, and bisexual students are quite a bit more likely to report low food security than straight students. 1.3 times as likely. And it's the same for each one of these behaviors that we look at. So frequent mental distress, LGB students are 2.5 times as likely to report frequent mental distress, 3.5 times more likely to have had a suicide attempt in the past year, 1.4 times more likely to have been binge drinking, and twice as likely to be current heroin users. These are statewide data, by the way. I can't actually break this stuff down by county. We just don't have enough students to do that in these small groups. Looking at gender identity. So our gender identity question, we're asking kids whether they're transgender, genderqueer, or gender fluid. And so we see that the students who are gender minorities are much more likely to report, again, the same thing. So this is low food security, more likely to report low food security. They are 2.5 times more likely to report frequent mental distress, way more likely to report suicide attempts. Binge drinking, there's no difference, and they are 6 times as likely to report heroin use. When we look at short-term residents in the United States, these students are 1.4 times more likely to report low food security. They are less likely to report frequent mental distress, which is a little curious. And I think I think frequent mental distress is going to be very, very important for us to look at. It really is showing us something that's different from a lot of the suicidal behaviors in the sadness measure. So we'll have to see what we get out of that. Suicide attempts are more likely to report suicide attempts. The short-term residents are twice as likely to binge drink, and they are 15 times more likely to be heroin users. Another group is students with physical disabilities, and we see pretty much the same story. They are much more likely to report low food security, much more likely to report frequent mental distress, suicide attempts, binge drinking, and current heroin use. And finally, the group that's probably facing the highest risk and intersects a lot with those other groups that we just looked at are homeless students or unhoused students. So compared to students who live in stable housing, they are 3 times as likely to report low food security. They're not more likely to report mental distress, 2.5 times more likely to report suicide attempts, 3 times as likely to be binge drinkers, and 49 times more likely to be heroin users. So it's about 2/3 of the heroin users in high school are homeless. So it's really something that we see mostly with the homelessness. But the point here, of course, I think is pretty obvious. But if we want to address problems like heroin use or any of these other risk behaviors that we're looking at, we can't really do that if we're not going to look at homeless students, or at least include them in our interventions. And the same is true for the other groups. If we're not including students with physical disabilities or short-term residents or gender and sexual minority students, we're probably not going to be having a lot of success in addressing any of these risk behaviors that we look at. So I think that's pretty much it for the data portion. Just I'm going to skip over the summary slides here, but pretty fast. But COVID's a big thing. We did see these increasing rates for mental health and suicidal behaviors. In general, the decreasing rates for alcohol, drugs, and tobacco use. And again, I do just want to emphasize this, that we really have to make our interventions inclusive of these high-risk students. So homeless students, sexual minorities, gender minorities, students with physical disabilities, and students who have a short residence in the United States. Again, strong relationships with family, school, community, peers. These students have much lower rates of risk behaviors. And this is our website. If you go to youthrisk.org, you can find your county reports by clicking through here. And here is the Otero County report. I think when we had this meeting a couple of weeks ago for the Otero County Health Council, the middle school reports were not posted yet, but they are now. So if you want to look at your middle school reports, they're up for both Lincoln and Otero County and most other counties in the state. So that's the presentation. That was
perfect.
close
Thank
to
you
the time
so
I said.
much. Yeah. What questions do we have? People are not on my screen again. So does anybody have questions? And there was a lot of information.
So I have a question on just some of the data that's collected. Do you guys ever include the homeschool, like the Pecos Academy or any of the homeschool kids in taking this?
We do not include homeschool students. It's people have to be on a campus in a school, or we just don't have a way of reaching them really. The Pecos Academy, I'm curious about that school. That is that a homeschool? Because they've got a physical location. I guess it's a cyber school. Is that right?
So it's a homeschool and they have live teacher lessons, it's all through like Zoom. But it's a accredited public school, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So it would be handy to know some of these things about homeschool students. There are not enough homeschool students that they really would affect our statewide rates or even our county rates. But they really, it's very difficult to get into those types of environments anyways. The main reason we don't go there. Yeah.
What other questions are there? Are we just overwhelmed with the information?
I'd really like to hear what people may have to say about the sadness and hopelessness rate in Otero County and Lincoln County too, because it's come down at a time when it's gone up everywhere else in the country and everywhere else in New Mexico. I don't know if people have some sort of idea about that. We expected that because of COVID, all the mental health measures would get worse, actually, and here we see kind of a decrease.
I think that a lot more people are seeking treatment. There's less of a stigma since COVID, just because a lot of the symptoms that people experience that didn't have mental health conditions before were then understanding the experiences that people with diagnosed conditions have. And so there's less stigma in getting help, I believe. And I think more people are just out there getting the resources that they need.
Okay. So do you think that there's more kind of outreach to kids in Otero County or Alamogordo than elsewhere?
I know we've got some great counselors in the school. Maureen and Jeanette
Yeah.
have more feedback on that because I don't usually deal with kids. So
Yeah.
Jeanette, you want to go first?
Sure. I think, one of the things that Otero County did, specifically Alamogordo Public Schools, is implement a mobile bus during COVID. And so they were able to do outreach into people who were not in school at home. And so that was a really, really positive thing. They were actually on Good Morning America for doing that and having this creative, innovative idea, but they did it with medical, dental, and mental health. So that's my input as far as like the positives. The negative part of like not having the data, and I was looking to see if anybody from the school was on here, but I don't see anybody. Is that, that there was a lot of people who moved as well during that time or did not return to the school setting. And they there was they had a very high number of students that they couldn't get a hold of. So that's part of some of the missing data, I think.
Maureen, what other information did you want to share?
Thanks. Well, and I just wanted to ask, because I was wondering too, Dan, sometimes we see an anomaly like that in the data, right? Where one county is like way different than what the average is showing, or their other, nearby counties are showing. So I wondered if you think that could be any kind of artifact because of like the lower response rate in Otero County the past time, or how your feeling is about the validity of that particular data point, given that I know we did have a much lower response rate last time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and it's kind of what I consider first, I guess, usually. I guess I'm a little bit more curious about this because for almost everything else in the survey, Otero County is going the same direction as the rest of the state. So it's not it's not on this one, but it could be some kind of funky COVID related thing that kind of affected who was in school that day, or something like that, or just the fact that we did have a poorer response than usual.
Yeah.
And so we'll just have to wait and see what we do in 2025, which we are gearing up for now, and we will be in the schools in fall. And by the way, I'll just segue to a little pitch here, is that we might be calling on some of you to help us out with our participation rates at some point.
And there was one question in the chat as well, Dan. Just somebody asked, can you clarify the two high-risk bars, like physical disability versus non-physical disability? How those comparisons? High-risk bars.
Let's see. I can try to pull that up again really quick here. Okay. Whoops, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Try one more time. So I think this is what you're talking about. So these colors are almost the same. Sorry about that. But so this lighter green